Welcome to the Streets and People podcast presented by Get Around Cabo Car Free. Get Around Cabo Car Free is a volunteer community movement advocating for more transport options for people who can't drive in Caboolture and Morayfield in Queensland. In today's podcast, we'll be covering one of these three broad topics. It might be Road Rules 360, where we discuss Queensland's road rules, the legislation, the design for people walking, biking, in wheelchairs or on a scooter. It might be Not Everyone Drives, where we chat with people whose transport options don't include a car in a car-dependent society. And it might be People and Projects, where our conversations are with people working on a specific aspect of inclusive transportation. So today we're doing one of our Not Everyone Drives episodes. Before I talk about our wonderful, lovely guest, we are here today on Gubby Gubby Country. And I know Johanna because I kept seeing this bicycle around my neighbourhood, and it's a particular European style one where you've got the box at the front. It's called a bakfiets, which I think the translation from Dutch is bin bike. That's
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I looked it up because it's quite unique. It was very fashionable. Apparently, decades ago, went massively out of fashion in the Netherlands and has recently come back in fashion. That's the history of the bakfiets. And I kept seeing this bike and I'm going, I've got to get them. I've got to get them. And finally, I don't know, was it you or was it your husband who I saw? And you had the kids and I'm going, bakfiets, bakfiets. And I was thinking, oh, crazy person, because I'd see you cycling past my house.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for coming on today. The reason I thought it'd be great to have you on is because you come from Germany.
That's right.
And you've been living here just a short couple of years. And it would be really good to hear about the lived experience of riding a bike in Germany and wherever you come from.
It's Hamburg, which is in the north.
Did you come from the CBD central area, or were you on the outskirts? Have you ever lived on the outskirts in a place a bit like Caboolture?
I grew up more in a tiny, smaller village, and then we lived smack in the middle of Hamburg. So both, I can talk about both.
Okay, your husband, he's come from Caboolture. I've met his mum.
Yeah.
You're sort of Caboolture, and that's why you're back here with the kids, living the dream in Caboolture.
Close to the family and everything, which is
exactly.
nice. Yep.
And that's why you're here. But you actually were living in Germany, in Hamburg. Is that where you came from just now?
Yep, that's right.
And you had the children there.
All three children, and we didn't have a car for, I would say, 3 of the 5 years that we lived there. We didn't have a car, and we only had the bikes, or we had like a little trolley that we would pull behind us, and we would use public transport.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in the centre of a town, it's
you
really
can do
easy.
that. That's right.
It's like in Melbourne, in Sydney, even in Brisbane, the bike paths are really good. It's a completely different story on the outskirts.
No, that's correct.
So you said you were on the outskirts of Hamburg. How would you say it compares with Caboolture in terms of its feel, like transportation-wise?
In Germany, I think it depends a lot on where you are. So I didn't grow up in the outskirts of Hamburg. I grew up in the outskirts of a southern town, which is very like hilly, and there are lots of mountains. So people don't actually ride bikes so much. And I remember when I had to go to school, my parents, because they are from North Germany where everyone rides their bike, they used to force us to ride our bikes to school, and we were the only ones who would do it. So it is a different story if you live in the city centre of a flat northern German town compared to living in the mountains, because it's harder to ride your bike there. But I would say if you compare it to Caboolture is relatively flat too, and it has beautiful weather, and I sometimes wish more people would discover their bikes.
What I notice at the moment, now that it's a little bit cooler, because here we are, it's May 2024, it's not so wet, it's not so hot, so it's a little bit easier. I see tons of people on the Wamuran Rail Trail.
It's better, doesn't it? Yeah, I agree.
In that very hilly area, so Montreal is very hilly. It snows for 8 months of the year. They have great bike paths. So I'm curious as to why, but that is in the centre of Montreal. Was that Stuttgart?
So we lived close to Stuttgart. Yeah, we lived in Stuttgart too, actually, and it's a different story. So in Stuttgart, for example, there was this one tram, and they had a little back cart for bikes, because it went up the hill, so you could park your bike in the back and then ride back down, which was awesome. So the tram actually had like a little trailer for bikes.
Very cool. That's a really good thing. So that's for our policy people. What can you do with a tram? So I think the Gold Coast is the only place which has a tram in Queensland. had.
Yeah, right.
But if there anybody living in Melbourne who's listening to this, actually, that's actually a really cool idea.
Yeah.
All right, so it is really different on the outskirts. Now, you were just saying that your parents forced you. Did you feel a bit like
Sounds pretty cruel. It was actually good. I appreciate it now looking back.
Did you feel that like the other kids were laughing at you for being a bit different or anything?
No, I wouldn't say that. No, I think I think Germans don't, maybe in that part of Germany, they don't ride to work as such, but for recreational reasons, Germans ride bikes. Like mountain biking is a big thing even there because you have the mountains, so it makes sense.
You should be able to ride a mountain bike in the mountains.
Yeah, that's right. No, I don't think anyone laughed. It was maybe just a bit unusual, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a sort of an idea that you were poor and you couldn't afford a car?
No, I don't think that was on anyone's mind.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Did you ever feel unsafe on the road while you were riding your bike in that space?
Yeah, if you don't have bike paths, I would say it's always you always feel a bit unsafe wherever you are. Because, I mean, even if someone only drives 30 kilometers an hour, it's still faster than you go. And depending on how angry they are because of having a bad day or whatever, they can intimidate you pretty quickly.
Yeah. So let's talk about 30 kilometres an hour, because we had somebody on the show called Rod King in the UK, what's called the 20's Plenty campaign.
Yeah.
And that's going from 30 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour, which
awesome.
is the same as 50 kilometres an hour
To 30
kilometres an hour here. And we had this fantastic talk about the difference between life and death. He was actually inspired by a town in Germany. So even if somebody can be intimidating, if you're going at 30 kilometers an hour, you still exist.
Yeah, I
as a
actually
person.
got hit once by a car with 30 kilometers an hour and I just got up and walked away. Nothing happened. Like my bike was not usable anymore, but I was fine. So
Yeah, a bit shaken up.
But shaken, definitely shaken.
How did that collision occur?
Oh, that was my mistake. I was really tired, and you have the rule in Germany: if you come from the left, you go before the right. If there's no street sign or traffic light, that's just a general rule that everyone should know.
So the equivalent, it's on the other side of the road. So if you're in an Australian equivalent street, and you're going along onto an oak crossing and you're going on one side, then the person on the right has the priority.
Has the priority.
We have the same rule here.
So, and I was just dreaming away, and it was really quiet. It was early in the morning and I didn't expect a car. And then I saw it and it saw me and we both tried to brake but couldn't anymore. It was my own mistake.
It doesn't matter at the end of the day whose mistake
that's right.
it is.
No,
the
you
point
don't.
is it can
That's
happen.
right.
And if that person had been going 50 kilometres an hour, well,
it would have been a different story.
You wouldn't
for sure.
be here, actually.
That's exactly right.
And that's obviously a long time ago because you're a fully grown-up person now. Now cars are a lot higher. The bonnet is a lot higher. Those bullnose ones, what happens now with those very higher bonnets at the front is that children, instead of...
They don't even see them sometimes, do they?
That's one of the issues. And the other one is that when you hit a child, instead of bouncing off, so you bounce onto the bonnet and then over the roof and then onto the other side. Is that what happened to you?
That's what happened,
Yeah.
Not the other side, but definitely.
Yeah. So what happens is you go underneath and you actually ride over the top of the child.
I've never thought about that.
Yeah, that's why the pedestrian deaths are so much higher at the moment.
Yeah.
Because of the front of the bonnet.
Yeah.
That's actually the major reason.
Wow.
They're heavier vehicles, so they take longer to stop.
Yeah.
And then because they're these huge, great big monster trucks, people just go under them. That's what it's about. Yeah. So it's a huge issue.
That is a shame.
You did have a crash and you survived that because of the lower road speeds.
Yeah.
And because of the design of the car.
I would say so, yeah, definitely.
And that's why you're here today. Otherwise your parents would have, you would have just been killed and your parents would have had a whole different experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hearing that, I feel really affected, actually. I wouldn't be talking to you today.
That's exactly right, yeah. Totally.
And that's the difference, I'm sort of I'm glad that it was in a
Wendy.
different era, in a different place. Yeah, so I'm quite keen to get down to 30 kilometres an hour just for exactly that reason. And then you moved into the centre of Hamburg later. Did you go to university or something?
No, just for work. My job was in the middle and Hamburg is a big city like Brisbane, so it was just handy to, I wanted to have time with the kids and not a big commute. So I had 8 kilometres that I could easily bike in the mornings. And it was good half an hour that I had to think about going to work or coming back home, and I really liked it.
And you get incidental exercise that way.
That's right. Yeah, I'm not very good at exercising, like going to exercise, so I really like just integrating it into my daily life.
This is what all the research says. So we had somebody recently called Dr. Jennifer Kent, and she just said this kind of thing changes your whole well-being.
Yeah.
An hour a day, you said?
No, half an hour each way, and I had 3 kids, so I didn't really have time to go exercise, you know, or like to go to the gym. Like making time for that if you have a family is really hard sometimes. So whether I spend the half hour in the bus or on the bike, for me it doesn't make a difference time-wise, but it does health-wise.
Yeah. So the bakfiets is a box at the front of the bike.
Yeah.
And that's what you have here.
That's what I have here, and that's how I get my kids to school. So again, I'm trying to integrate it into my daily life. So I take my kids to Wimmera to school, which is again 8 kilometers, and I have the bakfiets, and I have 2 kids in the front in the box, and then I have 1 kid in the back.
And everybody wears a helmet.
Everyone wears
issues.
a helmet.
And how heavy is it? Because I can imagine how you're basically going to the gym doing serious weights.
Well, I'm cheating a little bit, to be honest. I have an engine in the bakfiets, electrical.
Okay.
It's an electrical bike.
Yeah.
It's a very, very heavy bike. So even with the engine, I've made my husband right next to me without an engine just to see how far I have to go up with the gears to be an equal speed to him without.
Yeah.
And I have to go up to 5 out of 9 to just be equal.
Okay.
So that's how heavy the bike is.
Yeah.
So I do need an engine. I'm like 160 tall and not very heavy.
So we had Phil Latz on the show recently, and he used to be a competitive cyclist since 1972. He's been in the cycling world, and clearly he would have been a lean machine.
He would have done it.
His wife used to be a cyclist as well, and she now has arthritis and all sorts of health conditions. Yeah. But they've got this e-trike.
It's so good.
And
it's so good.
She's able to be really
that's right.
mobile and independent.
And it has another benefit. So if I'm late in the morning, I can speed it up, you know? Yeah. I can actually go super fast. And whereas if I have time, I can tune it down, and the kids sometimes get out and they run next to me, you know, if they have too much energy. So that's really nice.
And how do they respond to being driven by a bike? And what do the other kids say about it?
They love it. My kids really like it. If I give them the choice, they always choose the bike, and they take their book in the bike. Or like we've seen like so much wildlife on the rail trail. Like we've seen echidnas and snakes and everything really. Kangaroos. We have these 4 kangaroos that always stand there, and we feel like they greet us every morning.
I know where you're talking about. I've seen those kangaroos.
No, they really like it, and all the kids at school love it. I hear that so much, like, oh, we've seen you on the bike this morning, you know, and we always wave to you, and like, yeah, it's really fun.
Well, this is the case from the other day. So I arrived at the supermarket the other day in my big red bike with the 2 boxes.
You can always see Wendy too.
Yeah, exactly. And I went, I know who's in the supermarket. Yeah. It was either going to be you or your husband.
And you know, it happened to me twice at Aldi's that afterwards when I put my shopping in the bike, because I go shopping with it too, and it looks really nice with the supermarket fruit in the front.
Right.
And so people just go like, can I take a photo of you?
I haven't had that yet because I do my grocery shopping over at the markets.
Yeah,
so
nice.
I have all the fruit and veg, and people are like, wow, that's really efficient.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But you guys do have a car.
Yeah, we do have a car.
But you don't have a second car.
No, we don't have a second car. We only use it to go further because you can't go up to, say, Mullaney or something with it, right? Like, it's not easy to ride on the roads. I wouldn't do that with the kids.
You wouldn't. No, that would be a death wish for sure.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, on a previous time, we've talked about getting the buses around here. You would like to be able to potentially take the bus sometimes, you know, when it's pouring with rain.
That would be a good alternative to get to Wimmera. If it rains, we can't go on the bike.
But you found that you can't do that.
No, you can get there from Caboolture in the morning, but you can't get back from Wimmera unless you wait until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And even then, it's not 3 o'clock when the school ends. It's actually 2:30, which is very badly planned. So you have to leave a half an hour earlier from school to be able to get back from Wemrian to Caboolture.
Wow.
Yeah, and some kids do that. Like you see kids at the bus stop and they come early from school to catch the bus back.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you obviously have to drive. And
Then
this
we
is
have to
one of the-
drive.
It's 8 kilometres.
Yeah.
So 7 in 10 journeys are within 10 kilometres of home.
I believe that. We've done it for 1.5, not even 1.5 years now, and we've done more than 6,000 kilometers on the bike, which I know because every time we reach 10,000, my kids get like a celebration, you know, like they get like an ice block or something from
Did
the
you
shop.
say 6,000 or 60,000?
6,000 kilometers. No, 6,000.
So when you do get 1,000 kilometres,
Yeah.
then you get an ice cream from the shops
Yes.
that we said.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
all right.
we've done pretty much every term we've done 1,000 kilometers.
Okay.
Put that in petrol, you know? That's
Yeah.
how much we saved.
Yeah, exactly. What people don't realise
Yeah.
is basically a car costs between, it's about $1,000 a month minimum
Yeah.
every month.
Easy.
By the
Yeah.
time you pay for the purchase, the service, I think financing as
Mm-hmm.
well, petrol, insurance, and depreciation is one of those costs that people don't realise. So a car generally lasts about 9 years these days.
Yep.
And so from the time you've got the purchase price to the time you've
Yeah.
got to buy a whole new car again,
Yeah.
which is a decade later,
Yeah.
you've got all that depreciation, and that's a huge burden of the cost of it, in
I
fact.
think so, yeah. We've seen that too when we got a car in Germany, that we had to pay more money all of a sudden. Like we had so much money before we could pay more for rent, for example. We had like at least 200-300 euros extra just to put into rent, and we could get a bigger apartment because we didn't have a car, which was awesome.
How much euros did you say? 200, 300
Yeah,
euros
I'm not
a
even
week?
100% sure, but yeah, I would say 300 because we did car sharing. Like we had
Okay.
the car that we actually got in the end, we shared with friends.
Okay.
So we didn't have to pay the whole price, the full price, but yeah.
And so how much is 300 euros in?
That's about 500 Australian dollars.
Okay, so your wish list from the bus company is to have a bus that goes from the schools,
Yeah.
from Wemrian, back to Caboolture,
Caboolture.
after the school run, and from Caboolture in time for the school pickup,
That's right.
and then back again.
That would be awesome. That would
That
make
would-
it much easier.
Did you have these sorts of problems in Germany? Obviously not in the middle of town, but on the outskirts of
No,
town.
I think Germany is pretty aware of that, to be honest. I had heaps of friends when I went to high school that came on buses, and the buses would always go more around school times or around office hours, and then maybe less in the afternoons or the evenings, maybe every 10-20 minutes.
All right, so let's talk about bike infrastructure in the town near Stuttgart, on the outskirts there. What was the infrastructure like? Did you have bike paths?
So you did have bike paths, but maybe more similar to here. You had like rail trails like that, you know, like that you could go on, but not so much maybe on the roads themselves, like extra bike lanes. I do think that in Germany there's more people walk, for example, and more people ride their bikes even in little cities. So because there's more non-car traffic on the roads, people are more aware of each other.
Is that because it's 30 kilometres an hour and you feel safer?
No, maybe more because in Australia everything is pretty far away. Like if you want to go to the shops here, you would have to walk a long time. If you want to bring your kids, I think there's a rule in Germany, for example, that no primary school can be more than, I can't say exactly, maybe 2 kilometers away from everybody's house. So that in theory everyone can walk to school. So you don't actually have to drive your kids, and kids walk to school, they bike to school, they take the bus to school. So they're like way more like on the road.
I think they used to do that here, but there's been some really big shifts in
Yeah.
education here in
Yeah.
the last couple of decades. One is private schools, so a
Yeah.
lot of kids go to private schools now. That's a huge topic at the moment within transport world. What do you do about the school trip? Because it adds something like 30% of car transport, the number of trips.
Easy, right? And it
Yeah.
makes school so much more dangerous too, because
We're going to have somebody called Professor Matt Burke on the show. And I saw him at this Australia Pacific bike riding conference in Brisbane the other day. And he put this map and he showed these paths where the cars would go in the entrance area. It was 2 lanes going in the school grounds. Instead of having that as play area for the children,
you would have the
cars actually had a street in the school doing the school run, school pickup. And it was crazy.
that's what I'm happy about too. When I come and pick my kids up, I see all these cars, you know, this big traffic jam, and I just ride past them.
Fantastic. And the other thing that was really clear is that people are driving a long distance, but many people are actually going within 1 kilometre. But I think there's this idea here that if you let your child walk to school or ride bike to school, you'd be seen as a bad parent or a social pariah or something.
But it is more dangerous here too. Say another example is if you have a driveway in Australia, you have right of way. In Germany, you don't.
No, that's not true.
But it's treated like that, right? Like I'm scared to let my kids walk up to, say, their grandparents because I know that people don't stop for kids. Whereas they would never do that. Like that would never happen in Germany. You would get in so much trouble if you pushed your way out.
It's actually to do with the design of the footpath. But the legislation says that pedestrians and cyclists have priority on the footpath.
Right.
As it happens, I saw a post this morning about really starting to look at the design. So when you're in a car, it's like you're in a little capsule. Hermetically sealed from the world, and then you're in this car and going along and you're separate from the world. When I had this conversation with Rod King, because I was going, why are people so afraid of anything outside a car? And he said that what happens is when you're in this hermetically sealed environment, anything that you don't have control of, which is everything outside the car, becomes a fearful thing. So if a car comes behind you, you actually can't see in front of you. So if somebody blocks your vision in front of you, you can't move to get to the side. So
true.
You've got somebody behind and they're honking, or you can't go around the corner. You're actually really stuck. You have no mobility. That actually creates a whole lot of extra visceral fear about how much you actually don't control, in contrast to how much you do control inside the vehicle.
So, interesting.
Because on the bike, I feel like I'm riding along. I know that anything could happen at any time. I have no false sense of security that nothing could happen. So I'm always around and looking around.
More aware.
I'm conscious of who's in the environment and what's going on. I don't feel separate from it. I don't feel sort of cut off from the world and therefore afraid of it.
No, that's a good point.
What do the kids think about riding around? So your mother-in-law, your parents-in-law live about 2 kilometres.
That's about 2 or 2.5 kilometres.
I've met your mother-in-law a few times. She's a lovely person and she would love to have the kids, because I think it's 2 kilometres, go from your place to their place. And she's really keen to get that to happen.
And then again, we're both aware that it could potentially be pretty dangerous because of cars coming off out of their driveways. Because we've had that, like I bike to her house a lot with the kids. And because it is a good distance. And we've had that a few times that one of my kids almost got hit by a car coming out of the driveway, not checking. We both know that having them ride alone is fairly risky here.
I wonder if because few people ride bikes, drivers aren't thinking.
I think so. That's what I mean. And not many people walk, not many people ride their bikes. So it is not a thing that just happens to you all the time. So you're not quite as aware.
So around 1 in 2 people can't drive in Caboolture. Official figures from 2012, 3 in 10 can't drive. Somebody else who's an expert in this space, she says 4 in 10 people can't drive. That's the national average. And then here, we have more unemployment, lots of seniors, people in wheelchairs, lots of single mums, lots of kids, lots of people on low incomes. We have such a vast sort of class disparity, much greater than in other areas. So when you live in a central area, you tend to only just get well-off people. But we have well-off people, and then we have this extra dimension as well, which creates a lovely diversity in the community. The number of people who don't drive is greater because we have this extra diversity. I think here it's probably closer to 4.5 out of 10, coming up to 5 in 10 people. That's half the population. And in Germany, it'll probably be the same. But in Germany, what you can do is probably walk everywhere more safely because it's 30 kilometres an hour.
And because, that and also everything's a bit closer together, I think. We're a very dense country, so you wouldn't have to go 3 kilometres to get to school. You can just go 500 meters or something, like you do that easier by foot than catching a bus or hopping in the car.
So I was just thinking about this density thing. So Germany obviously was in the war and presumably it was bombed, flattened. The towns would have had to think, well, how are we going to rebuild our towns? And people think, oh, well, they're old places, Germany. And it's true. There are some places which are old. But actually, if you think about how much growth has happened, how was the towns redesigned after the war, kind of not that different from here.
Yeah.
But
Some of them, yeah, definitely.
when you look at the places that were built after the war, how car dependent are they compared to places which perhaps maintain their basic infrastructure?
That's an interesting question, Wendy. To be honest, where I came from was one of the most destructed cities in Germany after the war. But I don't think that they were very aware of bikes when they rebuilt it. I think it was mostly survival, to be honest.
Post-war Germany, or Hamburg, where it was, that area was completely decimated. And was it very car dependent? Did they create lots of car spaces? Was it built with cars in mind?
I would say probably yes. I think back in the day, a car was like a liberating thing for people, wasn't it?
So this is the same as in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
They were car dependent, and it was actually part of the Marshall Plan. So the Marshall Plan was a commercial transaction by the Americans. We will build your infrastructure as long as you buy lots of cars.
Yeah. I can't even say if that's not even the case for Germany. Possibly. I couldn't say, but yeah.
They needed so much money because everyone was broke after the war.
Yeah, that's right. And then later, I'd say even in the 60s or something, being able to go to Italy in your car was like the dream, you know, for everyone to just be mobile and be able to go wherever you wanted to. It was like the big freedom thing.
So there's just been this idea that the car is going to be the liberator. The car is the liberator for all transport modes. Actually, it turns out that it's a huge burden, but people have this sense of their own sort of sense of space is larger.
And I mean, Germany is a car country too, right? Like, definitely.
BMW, Porsche, they're all German car companies.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think they have a big influence there too, which I wish was different. But I feel like people are coming around a bit more.
Do you feel that that's the case in Germany as well as here?
Yeah. But say Hamburg, for example, is a really interesting example because they have how do you call the minister that is responsible for traffic minister?
The transport minister.
Transport minister. Yeah. He made like the numbers of people biking 1/3 higher than they had been before he started by just closing down roads, and they were only allowed for bikes, for example, or he would like renovate all the bike paths. So infrastructure is actually the key for people to use bikes, because since he's done that, the numbers have gone up so much.
What year was that?
The last maybe six years, I think he's been in.
Very recent.
Yeah, very recent. And it's all like existing conditions, right? Like he didn't change anything about the city or the layout. He just used what was there, and like say there was a 2-lane street and he would make 1 lane a bike lane. So that sort of stuff is fairly easy to do, and it makes such a big difference for people to be able to use.
And so was there
bikes.
A lot of outrage?
I think because he didn't really advertise for it, you know. Afterwards he was like, look, this is what we've done, and it's actually shown that it's awesome because people are using their bikes so much more. So afterwards he said it, but while he was doing it, he was pretty quiet about it.
Cairns, apparently, in northern Queensland, that has something like 600 kilometres of bike lanes.
Wow.
The Gold Coast, that has hundreds of kilometres of bike lanes. The Sunshine Coast, that has hundreds of kilometres of bike lanes. I think Bundaberg is now looking at hundreds of kilometres of bike lanes. And the reason why these places have good bike lanes is because the councillors are bike riders.
That would make a difference.
So I believe that one of our councillors over at Redcliffe is a bike rider.
Yeah.
And they have
good bike paths.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's about convincing the local councillors here.
Because you only know what the struggles are when you experience them, don't you?
Exactly. It's like being in a wheelchair or pushing a pram. So a lot of mums, they become militant about footpaths when they start pushing a pram.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah.
Let's talk about things that you see here that are good, are challenging, and some ideas maybe from Germany that you've seen there you think would be great to implement here.
But what's good is that I think people are really adventurous here. Like they do like trying out new things, and like I said, oftentimes people have come up to me and they ask me like, where can I buy one? You know, I really like your bike and that would be an awesome thing to have, and they're really like enthusiastic about the idea of it. So that's really, really nice. I really enjoy that. And like you said, it brings you closer to the community and everything. That's really awesome. Take the rail trail. That's like a great initiative. You know, it's the reason we can bike to school. I really like that.
Yeah, right.
And people are really positive here too. That makes me really happy to see how happy I make them, you know. Like we went to the bike shop the other day because we needed to fix a part of the bike, and then there was this other couple in there, and they were like, "Oh, do you ride to Wimmera? I see you." You know, like that sort of stuff. You just get these responses, and people are really generally happy to see you.
Okay, so you've spoken before about the journey you see echidnas and snakes and the wildlife, and also I see you quite often on the Wimmera, and I do my morning bike ride as you're coming to or from your school, and there is that sense that we are connected. So sometimes we've actually stopped and chatted and said, but even if it's just a quick hello for 2 seconds, it does give this sense of being in the community.
That's right. No, I agree. And you can stop, you know, like easier than with a car. You can just stop and chat, or stop and look at an echidna if you see one, or you can stop and let the kids have a run or something. It makes it much easier, right? What's not so good? Maybe the lack of possibilities. Say when I want to go to Morrowfield, because that's what you do a lot. Like you go out to the shopping center because you're in need of whatever you need. I don't like biking because I don't have the opportunity to ride on the road. And even if there is like an extra lane, there's often so many cars parked there that it makes it really tricky.
That's called the road shoulder. Even if it was a bike lane, Queensland is the outlier in Australia. You can park your vehicle. They fought tooth and nail to keep that. I feel that with these big trucks is how intimidating that is. So if you're crossing over at the T-junction on the outside of it.
And the wind, you know, if they rush past you, the wind actually blows you to the side. It's quite frightening.
Yeah. And what are some ideas of what you've seen in Germany that you think, that would be really good if they did here?
Sometimes a road can still be driven on by a car, but the bikes have priority.
So they have streets called Car is Guest.
That's a really smart concept, I think, because it actually gives the responsibility back to the cars to watch out for the other one.
So we are coming up to the end. What else would you like to add?
Get inspired and see the benefits of biking, because it's just such an awesome thing, and it slows you down, you know, it gives you space to think and be creative and develop ideas. So yeah, no, I'm a big fighter for bikes now, even though my parents forced me to bike to school.
So my understanding is that people would love to bike.
I think electrical bikes make it so much more possible. Like for say elderly people, if they feel like they want to go and exercise and enjoy that, they have so much time on their hands, and now they can buy an electric bike and have such a big range.
Well, thank you very much for coming on, and it's been really great. I've had a great conversation.
Yeah, same. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for enjoying Streets and People, presented by Get Around Cabo Car Free. We publish our podcast regularly at the usual places and on our website, where you can find out more about us. getaroundcabocarfree.com.au. That's www.getaround, get around, that's pretty straightforward. Cabo, C-A-B-O, that's short for Caboolture. Car Free, C-A-R-F-R-E-E. There's no hyphen in that. .com.au. Our theme music is The Thief on AM Sound, which is just like our cars on our streets, always stealing the space. So let's stop that thief.